Hello beautiful people, welcome back to the channel. Pots and Petals here, everything garden and allotment related. Today is June's plot tour, so we'll be going around the plot. I'll be showing you what's been going on. We'll have a look around the fruit cage, the polyhouse, we'll even have a look in the ponds and some of the wildlife areas today. It has only been 3 weeks since my last plot tour video, as I'm trying to bring them forwards to the first week of the month. But even in those 3 weeks, there's been so much change and new growth in all of the beds. So there's still plenty to show you. So come on guys, let's start at the beginning of the plot where we normally start. And I'll take you around and see what's been going on. I have also got to take check of some of the jobs that I need to do. So it's a good opportunity just to make a to-do list as we walk around. So come on, let's get stuck in. Just as we approach my plot, you can see this area here needs a really good trim. It doesn't matter too much because it is where I park my car, but it is nice to have it looking a little bit tidy. So I have brought the trimmer with me today to tidy this area up. And I also just want to sort of have a little tidy up in there. The teasel's growing really strong. I think because it's next to the compost bins, we've got some runoff of nutrients. And that's why it's done really quite well. We've got quite a lot of flower spikes on there, and it does also seem to be attracting some of the aphids. So I'd rather the aphids all over my teasel and my weeds than I would the rest of the plot. But looking back at my last plot video, I was looking at it last night and seeing these beds, and you could barely see the new growth just as the seeds were starting to germinate. And already they're about a foot tall. So a lot of changes in these beds, lots of growth, but we'll go and have a proper little look in them now. So just down here are the sweet corn. I direct sow these at the beginning of May every year, and they germinate sort of mid-May, beginning of June time. And last time we were here, they're actually only a few inches tall, so they've put on a hell of a lot of growth in just 3 weeks. I do find that direct sowing them, they do catch up pretty quickly with the ones which are sown in trays a little bit earlier. But I did have to plug in some of the gaps with some bought plants. So we'll see how they fare compared to the others. But even those in that far bed, we'll go and have a proper look in a minute. They're doing really well. So we should have plenty of sweet corn this year. It's crazy to think that 3 weeks ago these were just a couple of inches tall. They've really started to put on some growth and thicken out. This one here is probably the best specimen. It's about 1.5 foot tall now, and it is starting to thicken up. So we'll give these a good feed. I do give them chicken manure, so we'll give them a nice water, but they're doing really well. So in a couple of months this should be a bit of a corn jungle, really. This is the little messy corner. So I've got 2 compost heaps here. I gave them a really good turn. If you remember, I had sticky weed growing out of here, nettles, so gave it a really good turn. I've added loads of matter on top of it. Now it's important to keep your compost heaps turned, get that oxygen in there, and just to aerate the matter, and just to keep that warmth going through, so it can rot down nice and quickly for you. And then just in this area down here, I do need to give this a bit of a weed. So we're starting to get the pot marigolds, or calendula, whichever you want to call them, starting to come through. I do need to come through and weed and pull out some of the poached eggplant, because that has well and truly gone over. And we've also got quite a few weeds in here as well. As I pull out the poached eggplant, that will leave some soil bare, which will then germinate all the little pot marigolds that we've got popping up now. So it just allows them now to bloom throughout the summer. So I'll give this area a good weed under that apple tree, because it's only been planted a couple of years, so I don't think it will be enjoying that. Now we have got some sort of problem with the tree, so let's just take a little closer look. I don't know if you remember, I'd done a short video which had these tiny little caterpillars all in the leaves of my apple tree, and I found these skeleton of leaves, and it seems to be covered in some sort of webbing. We've also got another few patches just up here. So I need to understand whether that's something that's going to be harming the actual tree and the fruits, or whether it's just something that doesn't look very nice. I mean, we have got a few apples on here. We just come in down here. 1, 2, 3, 4. I think I've counted about 8 on there in total. Last year we only got 2. But yeah, I need to do my research on that just to understand what pest that is and what harm that's going to do to the apple tree. But I'll keep you guys updated on that. And then just from the apple tree along here, we've got my rhubarb. So we'll probably get one more picking from the rhubarb this year. You want to stop picking come July time, just so that the plant can start putting that energy back into the crown, so that you get plenty of stalks next year. So please stop picking your rhubarb after July and make sure you're watering it well throughout drought seasons. And then the 2 trees that we've got one apple which is covered in apples this year, and we've also got a pear which doesn't seem to do too well for some reason. Now with the apple tree, this was just a stump when I came here, but it did start to grow some shoots, so I thought I'd give it a try and just let them grow. And we've actually been rewarded with quite a few apples on it this year. These are cooking apples from what I remember, so it'll definitely be used. But we've got a lot more on this than we have any of the other apple trees. So I'm hoping that doesn't get too much June drop. That's when your apple trees naturally drop some of the apples. But what you might want to do is just go round and check, and if you do find that there's still 4 or 5 apples to a bunch, you just want to remove a few. So you've only got 2 or 3 left, and that just gives the apples more space to grow and just stop some of that disease sitting in there when there's too many. So you end up with bigger apples. But I would wait until the end of June, July, and then just go around and have a little check. But yeah, I'm quite happy with the cooker this year. Just as we come to the end of this bed in this corner, down here we've got all of the peppers. So I think we've got about 12 plants in here. They're the bell peppers rather than chili peppers. Chili peppers seem to do better in the Polyhouse. And we've got some sunflowers. We've got 1 in each corner. And we've also got 2 tomato plants, 1 there and 1 just down at the other end as well. The peppers seem to do a lot better out in the garden than they do in the Polyhouse. In the Polyhouse, I think it gets a little bit too humid and wet, and it does seem to rot the fruit away. Whereas chili peppers are normally a little bit smaller, and they seem to do quite well in there. When I first popped these out, they did sulk for a couple of days, but they seem to have perked up, and the slugs don't seem to have found them just yet. So it shouldn't be long before we get some nice bell peppers for the year. I'm actually really chuffed with this bed this year. So down here we've got the dwarf French beans, and every year I've tried these before, the pigeons have got there first, the slugs have got there first, or they just haven't germinated very well at all. So they seem to have done really well this year. We've got a couple of tomato plants. Like I say, I like to spread them out across the plot. And we've also got a sunflower in each of the corners just to add some height and to add some colour into the beds. So I'm hopeful that these should do really well. I need to give them a really good feed, so we'll get some chicken manure pellets down on here just before we give them a water. Just down here we've got the onions. We've got 2 rows of onions, and in the middle we've got some garlic. They don't seem to have done too well this year. They do seem to be growing deformed. Now I don't know whether that's because of allium leaf miner, whether the sets were just a little bit naff, or it could be due to too much shade from the absolutely gigantic parsnips that I grew, which probably wasn't a great idea because I do know that onions do like quite a bit of sun. They haven't done too well down here, so this year is a bit of an onion fail, But I've learned for next year to give them a little bit more sunlight. But the parsnips, although they've caused quite a bit of shade, and I blame them for the onion fail, they look magnificent. In there, tons of different insects, types of bees, types of wasps, beetles, and not only that, it's attracting so many aphids. I'll take you in to have a closer look just to see how much is going on in there. The garlic have put on quite a bit of growth, so not only have they grown a lot taller, they're now starting to thicken up, which tells me the bulb is also now starting to thicken up. Now these were only planted at the beginning of spring, so they won't be ready just yet. I'll probably give them until the end of June, middle of July before I start testing them. And then we've got a couple of self-seeded sunflowers in this bed. This one's put on a hell of a lot of growth, that's easily 3 foot. And we've got one, just a little one over in that corner, and one growing out of the path. So we'll leave those, and I think I've got a couple of, we've got 2 tomatoes in there as well. Like I say, I do like to dot around the tomato plants, just so that if we do get some blight, they don't get them all at once. So just to give you a bit of perspective, we've got the parsnip here, we've got the garlic, the sweet corn, the peppers, and then just round there, that's where the dwarf French beans and the onion bed is. We're just under the pear tree. It's absolutely covered in baby pears. It seems to do well every year. But as I said in my previous video, the pears seem to stay rock solid for ages. So if anybody knows how to get around that, or any good recipes for really hard pears, please let us know. Down there we've just got the wildlife pond. We'll go and have a look in a moment. And then down here, this is one of the gooseberry bushes. Now you can see it's started to flatten out. That's because pigeons have already started to go for the berries. They're not even ripe yet. So I'll let the pigeons and the birds take all they want from there, because just over here in that bush, I've got that all netted up, and they have much bigger berries over there. So we'll go and have a little look. I uncovered the pine berries, so I did have netting over these, but I've got 2 sunflowers and they just weren't going to grow if I kept the netting on, so we did take that off. Last year nothing went for the pine berries, as in birds, because they're white. I don't think the birds really notice them. So the netting's come off, and we've just got to hope that we don't have some clever birdies around that will come down and steal them. We've got quite a few to pick. They do turn quite quickly, so you've got to be down here quite regularly. See, these two are too far gone. Well, that's actually, I'll eat that one. It's not too bad, but you don't want them when they're started to blush, because they will turn to mush pretty quickly. So I'll go through there and see what berries we've got to pick. There's quite a few. They are quite small. They're not as big as your standard strawberries, but they do make a nice change to your standard red berries, strawberries I should say. And then down here, this is where we've got the goosey gogs. So I don't know if you can see. Let's lift up this brick, see if we can get in and show you just how big some of these are. So look, they're huge. They're bigger than grapes. I've got quite a few in there actually, so I'm hoping for plenty of gooseberries this year, for gooseberry fall and gooseberry jam. It does seem to be covered. It's not overly protected, so some of the birds could get in down under there, but I do find pigeons are probably the worst bird for nicking your gooseberries, and I don't think a pigeon's going to get in there. So they're okay. We'll see how they go. The alliums are now starting to go over, but we'll leave them in there. They have pretty little seed heads. And if we just have a little quick look down that corner, if you might remember, this was full of grass and old tulips, so I've given that a good clear out. Can't say the same for the neighbour's plot, which is looking an absolute mess. I will try and get in there just to cut some of the tops off so the seeds aren't flowing all around, because they will end up all on my plot. So we might see if we can get in there and give some of that jungle a bit of a trim. So we're properly under the apple tree now, and you can now see the Michaelmas daisies are starting to bud up, so it won't be long before they're out in bloom. They are proper summer blooming plants. That'll be another month or so, but already the ladybird larvae are out in full force this year. The parsnips are absolutely full of them. But if we look behind this jungle, and come down here, we've got the pond. So it does need topping up a little bit in there. It does seem to stay really clear just with the amount of pond plants that are in there, because I do know a lot of debris falls in, especially being underneath a pear tree, but also with all the seed head seeds falling in, it does get quite mucky in there. So we'll give that a good top up. I try to use the rainwater from the water butts to top my ponds up, but if all else fails, you can just use tap water. Don't worry too much. And the iris is now starting to go over, so I need to get in here, give it a bit of a trim, cut those seed heads off. But the grass around here, although quite jungle and weedy, I do like the protection that it gives this pond, which just gives the little animals in here that extra protection that they need. The carrot bed is looking as healthy as ever. I never seem to have a problem with carrots. I grow them in the same bed every year. I just top it up with a little bit of compost. Don't improve the soil too much, because it will cause your carrots to fork. I do like this bed because it does have the plastic edge around the outside, and I think it probably helps with the carrot root fly, because I've never had a problem with it since growing my carrots in this bed. The idea is that the carrot root fly only flies a certain height above the ground, which is a foot or two, which is about the height of these plastic walls. I don't know how true it is, but it seems to work for me in this bed. I've given the carrots a really good thinning out, and that just allows the carrots to start to swell up and grow into proper thick carrots for you to harvest. So I'll give these a really good water, because the raised beds do seem to dry out a little faster than in the ground. Down here in the other raised bed, we've got these spring onions, which are now starting to thicken up, so it shouldn't be too long before we can start harvesting the larger ones of those. And we've got 2 rows of them going down. Now I think some of it's being shadowed out by the feverfew, which has got quite big this year. I understand it is an annual, but seemed to have stayed the same plant over the whole year. Whether it was just a self-seed that grew near enough in the same spot, I'm not too sure, but it's grown into an absolute monster. But it's absolutely stunning. So I'm not too bothered. I think I might just get some of the self-seed and plant them around the plot, rather than have them in the raised beds. And then down just next to the spring onions, we've got the beetroot, which now I've got rid of the radish jungle. The beetroot is now starting to put on quite a bit of growth, so should start to swell up down at the bottom. And then down at the bottom of the bed, we've got another sunflower, self-seeded. I think that's going to be one of the large ones, but we'll just have to wait and see. With all the sunflowers, they're mainly self-sown, so I'm not too sure what the variety is, which I quite like. But I think it looks quite pretty with the feverfew, the parsnips, and once that sunflower's burst out, it will look quite pretty down here. So as we continue down the garden path, we've got the broad beans, which I'm sorry to say haven't done very well at all. We've got quite a bit of black fly on there. I haven't been down enough. I haven't taken enough care of them. It is my fault. I should have got down here earlier and tried to nip some of the tips out. We've got a few beans down at the bottom, so I might try and just cut the tops off. But at the moment, there does seem to be quite a bit of wildlife going on. So just in here, look, that's full of ladybird larvae. And the ladybird larvae are now starting to feed off all of the black fly aphids, which have just taken over the plants completely. So I might leave them for a little while longer, just so that, you know, it keeps the population of the ladybirds going. I'll give it another week or so, but then I really must start to chop them down, otherwise they'll start to go all over the actual broad beans themselves, and I would like a few broad beans to harvest. Down next to the broad beans we have got the parsnips. So I sowed these about 6 weeks ago. The taller ones in the middle were probably the first ones to germinate, but I'm actually finding that parsnip seeds are still trying to germinate down in this bottom corner. So they are stubborn seeds to get going, so don't worry too much if even after 3-4 weeks you still have no parsnips coming up. But we should have just enough this year. I will keep a few to go to seed, not quite the jungle that we've got this year. And then just at the back there, we've got the same problem with the onions. We've got red onions here and white onions at the back. Now, I think the elder tree is actually causing too much shade for these, so probably not the best bed to put the onions in. And what I just need to go through and do is take the flower heads off some of the onions. So you see these down here. I just want to pinch them off to stop them from going to seed, because you won't get very nice onions. So I'll give these a nice watering in, but I must remember next year the onions do not like any shade. As you can see from a bit of a closer look, they are coming up quite deformed, but I do believe it is purely because of the amount of shade that this area gets. It's probably not the best site for onions, so I will be trying onions further up there, because that does get a lot more sunlight and I have had better success in the past. So we'll see how these go. The only way I'll know if it's allium leaf miner is when I start to harvest them, and I can just search a couple of the bulbs. Hopefully with a bit of water and a little bit more time they will start to swell. They were only planted in the March, so beginning of spring, so they haven't been in there too long. So we'll keep them watered, we'll keep them fed, and hopefully we'll end up with some onions this year. And then if we just pan round over here, This is a bit of a nothing bed. It is going to be my asparagus bed next year, but we've got a few little lettuce in there which one of the plot neighbours gave me, and we've got a tomato and a few sad looking sunflowers. I do need to give it a really good weed, and we've got more parsnip at the back. I am intrigued when I turn this into my asparagus bed. I'm hoping that the parsnips down there have really broken up the soil, so it should be a lot easier to dig some manure and some compost in. But I'm worried that the parsnips might have taken up too much of the nutrients. So I'll be interested to see whether this side does better once I turn this into an asparagus bed next year. I do want to start tidying up a little bit at the back there, so some of that parsnip will get pulled down, but it does seem a bit of a shame just with the amount of wildlife that seems to be enjoying it at the moment. And as we just pan round to the seating area, it is a bit of a junkyard over there. I've got an old barbecue and I'm thinking about planting that up with some succulents or some alpines with some grit. So that's a little project to think about. I have got some bricks and some wood, and that plastic should come in handy for something. We've got the currants, they're now starting to turn red. We'll go and have a look at those in a moment. I am thinking about getting a nice wooden pub type bench for out here, just to make the area look a bit tidier. The plastic chairs aren't very tidy. And then I also want to start thinking about what I'm going to do in what was the chicken pen. The plan is that this grape is going to move over, and then the rows in the corner will also start to spread. So there's not going to be a huge amount of light in there because of the pear tree. So I need to think about what's going to deal with some of the shade in there. It does get a little bit of light, so that is something to think about over the summer for a winter project. And then just down here we've got the strawberry cage. I found a few strawberries in there that are almost ready to harvest, well, are ready, so I'll be having them with my cereal for lunch before any of the mice or any other little critters get in there before me. The birds can't get in because I've netted it over, but I do need to get in and give it a good weed as well, so that's a job I can do today or tomorrow. And also I need to clear out the greenhouse and give that a nice clean up, and maybe just tidy up round here. The shed is looking a bit of a dumping ground, and so is in there, so that's a job for this weekend I think as well. And maybe just weed out the back there before it gets too bad. I could also do with cleaning out the chicken house so we can sell that to somebody. Got a few plans just to tidy up this area and just make it a little bit more comfortable when I want to sit down here and just chill out. Down in the currant corner, the bushes are absolutely laden this year. This bit of string is just holding the netting in, which I'll pop back down in a second. But these are almost ready for picking nearly. So we should have plenty of red currants. I like these in my cereal with some yogurt, but they're also great for making a jam or on a cheesecake or in some form of dessert. So we've got the red ones here, they're first to start to ripen, and then we've got the pinks which are just here, and then down in the far corner we've got the white currants, which are normally the last ones to start to ripen. But I'll cover these up for now, and I reckon in a week or so I'll be able to get a really good harvest on there. I'll bring you round to the old chicken coop. Excuse the tarpaulin over there, that used to be the roof on top. I'm sure I'll find another use for it, but I need to think about what I'm going to do. It gets quite a lot of shade, so I need to think about shade tolerant plants. I don't think a pond will work in here just because the amount of coverage over the top and the foliage that's going to fall in will be a nightmare to keep on top of. But I don't want to waste this area because it's a great growing space, I'm sure. Given that the girls used to hang out in here all the time, this all used to be barked up, and their chicken poo, which would have built up quite a fair amount over the years, that would have really added lots of nutrients into the soil, especially nitrogen. So I need to think about making the most out of the soil down there and thinking about whether I want it to be an edible planting area or another decorative area, but also bear in mind that this trellis will hopefully be full of either rose or grape over a period of time. It's just a little project that I can start thinking about and planning out in my head. I probably won't start it until autumn, winter time. If you've got any ideas of what I could do in this area, please let me know, guys. I'd love to hear. Got one bloom on my rose and it smells absolutely beautiful. It's not the strongest of roses, but it's got a really soft rosy smell. A couple have already started to go over, like this one, but I've got plenty more buds to come. I do just keep coming and checking the green fly. Look up here, we've got quite a few on there, so we're gonna give that a good wipe, squidge all over. Go careful when you then start touching other buds that you're not just transferring aphids from bud to bud, so give your hands a good wipe before doing another. But that's come on really well this year, bearing in mind it was just one stem, and the hope is that it will start to cover all of this area along with the grape. Now we've got a bit of bindweed coming up here, I'll get rid of that just to clear it up a little bit. But it seems to really like that spot now that I've tidied up this corner and a bit of sunlight can get down here, and I've given it a really good feed. I just need to tidy this area up so it starts to look a little neat around here. Down in the 4 boxes, now this area gets quite a lot of shade. I did have I've got peas in here. Now they haven't started to flower and they haven't put on a huge amount of growth, so maybe it was just a little bit too shady down here for them. But the lettuce really enjoys it down here, so I think I'll keep this as some form of like salad box. At the back we've got radishes. They have started to go to flower, but I have heard that you can eat the pods that come off the top of these, so they'll look like little pea pods. So I'm going to let them go to seed and see what I can get off those, but I don't think I'm going to be getting many peas along here. And then as we move along, I've given this bed a really good clear out. The peas were in here, but they just weren't germinating, and when they were, something was eating them. So I thought I'll give up on that, and I'm thinking either carrots or some spring onions, just to keep that successional growing going on. And then at the back here, these are spring onions. They haven't done too well, but I am just going to keep on top of the watering. It was only three weeks ago maybe that I sowed them, so I'm not expecting too much. I can just sow in some of the areas where they didn't do too well. And then far at the back, these are my beetroot, so I have given them a good weed. I just now need to give them a good watering in, because they are looking a little wispy in there. Now with beetroot, you don't have to thin them out quite as badly as carrots. However, I would recommend just going in and giving it a, 5 centimetres per beetroot. It just allows them to swell up that little bit bigger. So you should end up with a little bit of a bigger beetroot rather than lots of small tiny beetroots. So it does depend on what you're after at the harvest. The potatoes are doing really well in their pots. There are a few of them that are looking quite wilted, as if they haven't been watered enough. But I've definitely been down here and keeping on top of the watering, and some of them are looking really healthy. So I don't know whether it just means some of them are ready to harvest, so I will have a little dig around. It just does seem a little bit early for these to be ready. I think another problem of it could be that the mulch, the bark chip, it doesn't hold on to the moisture quite as well when it dries out. Same with some of the leaf mulch. So I think I'm going to have to top these up next year with a little bit more compost just to hold on to that moisture. We'll have a little dig around in one and see what we can find. Just having a little dig in here, and it is actually quite a bit moister than what I thought, but we'll see what we can find. Oh. Now they're quite small. I don't think these are ready just yet. I think they need a little bit longer to bulken up, but I just thought I'd have a little dig around. But it's definitely moist enough in here. See, don't always just go straight to water. Have a little dig around in some of your pots to feel how moist it is in there first before you start watering, because sometimes if you overwater a plant, well, if you do overwater plants, you can kill them off a little bit faster than actually underwatering them. This area is looking much clearer and much cleaner after I got all of that blanket weed out the other day. I can see so much more wildlife in there. I did manage to get a picture of the baby newt, which I'll pop up on here now, and I have seen mummy newt in there as well, or daddy, and there's water boatmen, lots of stuff going out in there. Really sorry about the noise. We've just started up with some strimmers over in the neighbouring plot. The iris has just started to go over, so I will need to trim off those flower stems. I don't want it to self-seed all over the place because it is quite a large plant for this. And the watercress, that's starting to flower out the back. And then just back there, that's the wildlife area, which has really started to take off. Let's go and have a look and see what's changed since last time we were over there. Now, you're used to seeing the wildlife area from this angle, because this is where I start most of my videos, because I love this little corner. Now you'll see I've got plenty of weeds in there. I've got the teasel starting to grow, which I'm not too bothered about. But the achillea, that's really started to grow quite tall. That didn't flower last year, so it must have put all of its energy into creating lots of roots, because that's turned into quite a massive plant this year. We've got the red companion at the back with that bright vivid pink and those velvety silvery foliage leaves. We've got the allium now starting to go over, but it still gives that beautiful look. Quite fairy pixie feeling, those alliums. We've got some more achillea which is starting to bloom, and just behind that you can see all the little blue alliums that we've got dotted around in here. Now, I thought these were going to be blind, but this year they've actually started to pop up. I believe they self-seeded around. I don't remember planting them. And then at the back, like I say, a lot of it's starting to go over. But we've got the heleniums. They're now starting to flower up. We've still got all the achillea to go. All the alliums are now starting to go over, along with the forget-me-nots, which are all down here, but they'll self-seed all for next year. The hellebore, that's looking absolutely fine. That doesn't need to be cut back just yet. But all at the back there, most of it's starting to go over, but I'll leave that for the wildlife. And this is the heleniums, I believe they're called. They're now starting to bud up. That one is going to be a nice reddy colour. I'm not too bothered about the teasel. I quite like them. We've still got loads of achillea to come up, but I do need to think about better summer plants in this area, because the colour does fade once we start hitting into June and July. I love this beautiful allium down here, just those starry petals on each of those individual flowers. I do love an allium, and they make fantastic dried flowers. So once they start to dry out a little bit, cut them off and keep them inside so they don't rot off over winter. But they look stunning in a vase. Got a bay at the back there. The peony is somewhere down here, so I do need to try and clear some room for that. So that's got a little bit more room to grow. We've got a clematis here. I thought that had died last year, but it seems to have put on a little bit of growth, not too much, because if we just pan round over here, got the poppies. This clematis, it's put on loads of growth, so I'm trying to trail this up and over this archway. We have managed to reach halfway over the top, so I'm just trailing that along. I don't know if I'll get any more flowers this year. It did give quite a pretty show back in spring, but it's planted in the blue tub back there, so I do keep it nicely watered, because they do like plenty of water, a clematis. And we've got a foxglove which is in full bloom. And here the pansies are doing actually really well. They don't seem to be going over. I'll leave these because they will self-seed. You can eat the petals, pop them into salads. I've never tried it, so I don't know how well they'll taste. But this is the pot with the clematis in. if you are going to put a clematis in a pot, do make sure that it's plenty big enough, because they do like plenty of room for their roots to grow. It isn't normally something that I would advise, but I thought I'd just give it a go. But it's really started to take off up that trellis. I just need to tie this bit back, so we'll get some string like what I've done in that middle one for it to grow up. So we'll just do that up there, and that should start to grow over with a little bit of training. That's just the life corner at the moment of the pond, and that is where I normally sit and where you normally see me do my little intro at the beginning sometimes. One of the ugly truths of an allotment is you're always going to have a messy area, and this is one of my messy areas. So this is where I do a lot of my potting up, so my cell trays and my pots, even a Coke can ends up down there. So I want to give this a nice tidy up, and I need to decide whether I want this to be grass or bark chipping. Back here, this is where I'm going to make that all one great big bed and start planting some more native wild plants in there to make it more decorative. And in there, that's my cordlin. So I think I'm going to chop the top of that, just because at the moment it's putting energy into the shoots, but also trying to keep that top half alive, which we know isn't going to happen. So let's take the top off that this weekend, and then I might just put a little bit of plastic over the top just to make sure it doesn't rot anymore. Then at the back, we've got the hosta, which is currently looking like a doily, but we have got some flower spikes on that, which are quite pretty. Not much going on in the wildlife pond. There's a lot of snails in there, a lot of oxygenating weed, but I haven't seen any frogs or newts down in there. But they seem to hide out more in there than they do in the water. They'll probably go in there a little bit more in the summertime. But this area, like I say, is just quite wild. We've got the buddleia, which is now in flower. It's one of those globe buddleias where they're a bit like a lollipop. Hello, little kitty. The cat's just popped to say hello. Come on, let's say hello to her. Hey, what's up? Haven't seen you in a while. It is a bit of a warm one, but we're going to brave the Polyhouse together. Now, I've already had a little look in here, and everything has really shot up in the last couple of weeks. I've got plenty of tomato flowers now starting to produce. I was nipping them off, but I think I'm going to start to keep them on, just hopefully get some earlier tomatoes. There's a few that have started to grow quite tall, like this one just over here, which I'm going to need to string up just so that it starts to grow the right way, because that is going to start to twist. So that's a job I'll do before I go home today. It's just come in and also make sure that we're removing those side shoots that I told you about in one of my last videos in here. The courgettes, the patty pans, I've got 4 there. They've all come up, so I need to find a home for those. I'll wait for them to put on a little bit more growth, because they're quite small. They've only been up for a week or so. And then at the back, we've got the cucumbers. So we started off with 5 plants over here. We've ended up with 3, and that middle one doesn't look like it's going to be doing too much. But I've got good hopes for that one. I've got a little chilli down here. That seems to be doing okay. We've got another chilli here, which doesn't look too happy. I'm hoping that it's going to take off in a few weeks. And then the aubergines, they haven't put on any growth, so I don't think we'll be getting any of those this year. And then the hopeful side, my 5 cucumbers over here, they're looking great. So they do need a little bit of a water, but they've put on plenty of growth, and I will need to just start stringing them in a little bit to keep them growing upwards. That is how I'd expect them to look so far. So hopefully another glut of cucumbers this year. And I'll just give you a pan down here for how good they're looking. The French marigolds are out, and hopefully they'll be bringing in the pollinators to start pollinating those tomato flowers, and we'll just see how warm it's got. So we're looking at 47.8 degrees, 6.3 at night, which is actually quite nippy for June, but they'll be absolutely fine. They're absolutely fine temperatures for these plants to grow in. So yeah, I'll just go along and string these guys up. This is the volunteer potato bed. I will have a little rummage around in here before I go to see if I've got anything for tea tonight. We popped a tomato in each corner. We've got a cucumber in the middle. I'm hoping that as I harvest these, that will spread out into the bed a little bit. And at the back we've got even more potatoes in that and in that container as well. And if we move over to these beds, I've filled these with 2 squash in the back. We've got a dahlia just there, and then 2 tomatoes in each corner, and again 2 tomatoes just down here with a squash and a cucumber. So hopefully that will start to spread out. It might be a little bit too packed, but we'll see how it goes. And then just along here we've got more potatoes in a pot there, another potato pot, and then we've got the compost heap and just a couple of areas where I put some of the seedlings out when they don't need to be in the polyhouse anymore when it gets a bit too hot. Just along the side of the polyhouse we've got the achillea, which is in full bloom. The French marigolds are doing really well, and so are the pelargoniums or geraniums. So hopefully it won't be too long until this is really filled out with all of that colour. Down here just behind the polyhouse we've got the 2 squash plants that I planted up last week. These 2 done just here. Then we've finally got some germination on the climbing beans. So we've got a French climbing bean, which is a yellow one, and then we've also got a climbing standard green runner bean. And at the back you can see the leeks are now starting to flower. So it shouldn't be too long before they're covered in the bees. Now you did see me tidy up this area last weekend, so I won't go over it too much, but we have got germination down here as well. These are the climbing French beans, I believe, and we've popped a little tomato down here. And then in the bed we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 squash. So hopefully they'll start to fill this area out quite nicely. And just in this corner we've popped down a little cucumber, and we've got the three sunflowers. I'm not too sure, like I say, they're all self-sown, these sunflowers, so they will be a surprise as to what colours they are. I did have some red ones as well as some orange and your standard yellow, so that'll be intriguing to find out how they come on. Down in the wildlife area at the front of the plot we've got the crocosmia, which is now starting to put up its flower spikes, and these will have large bell flowers which will either be red or yellow. We've got 2 smaller plants just down there. We've got quite a few weeds in here, the poppy, the green aconite, and a few others just dotted around, quite a bit of teasel in there, but I'm not too fussed. The forget-me-not and the poached eggplants have really started to go over. So like I said I'm going to do in my other bed, is I'm just going to start going through and pulling some of that out, because a lot of that would have started to self-seed already. This is a parsnip which is in full flower, but as we come down here you can just see the poached eggplant really has now started to flop. So as I pull that up, that will leave lots of bare earth, and under there will be cosmos seeds, pot marigold or calendula seeds, and all of those will start to germinate over the summer months and just brighten up this area a little bit more. And at the back over here we've got the couple of dahlias, and these are now starting to bud up, and we've got quite a few buds on here, so I'm looking forward to this. I can't remember what they all look like. We've got another smaller one in the back there. Because some seem to die off and then I plant new ones. I forget every year which ones I've got. But we've got some Michaelmas daisies now starting to pop up. Some more calendula at the back. Sage is also starting to flower. And then we've got the Nigella forest with a foxglove. We've got some poppies in there. And already the Nigella is starting to go over to seed, which are these beautiful lantern type heads. And over the summer they'll go paper thin and they'll look like little paper lanterns. And we do have a pear tree in there which really doesn't like all this overcrowding. It's never done too well. I've never had any pears off it, so I need to think about what I do with this area. But the bees absolutely love it in here. That's all we've got time for today, folks. I haven't done the fruit cage because there's a lot of strimming work going on in that corner on somebody else's plot. So rather than you trying to listen to me above all of that noise, I thought we'd just leave it there today. I will give you an update in there tomorrow, and I will just pop you some footage of the gooseberry bushes because they're absolutely laden with berries this year, and they're quite big, like the size of grapes. So I hope you've enjoyed the June plot tour today. There's lots going on and I've got plenty of tidying up jobs to do, and I do need to fill in some of the gaps and sow some seeds. So I'll be about tomorrow, so join me on a few jobs that I'm going to get done. It has started to rain just now, and I believe we're due even more rain tomorrow night. So I hope you're enjoying the weekend wherever you are in the world, and I hope you join me again down on the plot for another video tomorrow. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment and all that good stuff, and I'll see you again down here soon. So take care, guys. Bye bye.